Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, March 9th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. As gas prices continue to soar, demands for help from legislators in Sacramento are getting louder. Governor Newsom touched on that in his State of the State address, but KPBS reporter John Carroll says the governor was short on specifics.
Good evening, everybody.
Running a state with the fifth largest economy in the world means contending with all sorts of issues, and Governor Newsom touched on lots of them Tuesday night. From the state economy to access to abortion to the environment, Newsom said the state was in good shape. When it comes to California's highest in the nation gas prices, the governor didn't have a lot to say. After mentioning his proposal to pause the next hike in the gas tax, about 3 cents per gallon, he went on to say this.
Now it's clear we have to go farther. And that's why, working with legislative leadership, I'll be submitting a proposal to put money back in the pockets of Californians to address rising gas prices.
With a state surplus estimated to be between $45 and about $70 billion, the state clearly has the resources to do something. Relief could come in the form of a pause in the state gas tax. That would save Californians 51 cents a gallon. Or it could come in the form of a rebate to taxpayers. That's what the governor has to work out with lawmakers. Before the governor's speech, State Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins acknowledged that the cost of gas is exorbitant.
The Speaker and I and our legislative houses have been looking at how we can assist Californians with more and additional stimulus.
Republicans went after Newsom on the gas price issue and more. Late Wednesday afternoon, Republican State Senator Brian Jones, who represents an area including El Cajon and Escondido, released a YouTube video. Here's part of what he had to say.
But there's a way to lower gas prices in California immediately by $1. Now, I know $1 isn't going to solve all your financial woes, but it is still a huge price decrease. The California State Legislature has the power to suspend the state's gas tax for a few months or a year or permanently.
And from State Republican Party Chair Jessica Millan Patterson, California today has America's highest unemployment rate, highest gas prices, and after ticking off other issues she sees as Newsom's responsibility, went on to say that lifelong Californians are moving to states where they can afford to live. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Major developments unfolding as the U.S. is now shoring up its defenses by sending more military equipment to Poland, preparing for possible war in Europe. It comes as new accusations are being made about Russia. Here's reporter Isabel Rosales.
My hometown always was a peaceful town, and now it's fully destroyed by Russian soldiers.
A mass exodus. The UN says more than 2 million Ukrainians have left home to escape violence.
No rules. Right now we see how many schools, preschools destroyed.
Russia's latest agreement to allow evacuations met with international skepticism. A Ukrainian maternity hospital bombed. Ukrainian officials blame Russia and accuse Russian troops of blocking 50 evacuation buses out of a Kyiv suburb. Wheels up. Vice President Kamala Harris on her way to Poland under a cloud of uncertainty. The U.S. caught off guard and rejecting Poland's proposal to transfer fighter jets to the U.S. to then give to Ukraine.
The prospect of fighter jets at the disposal of the United States government departing from a U.S. NATO base in Germany to fly into airspace contested with Russia over Ukraine raises some serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance.
Meanwhile, NATO is ramping up its defense deployment to counter any potential threat to NATO allies. The U.S. sending 2 high-end air defense Patriot missile batteries to Poland. Private companies also hitting back at Moscow. Starbucks, McDonald's, and Coca-Cola join a growing list of Western companies pulling out of Russia.
His economy is in tatters. The West is more unified and determined to make this a failure than ever.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales, KPBS News.
President Biden said that gas prices will continue to go up in light of more sanctions on Russia, but experts say it's not just gas prices that will increase. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado looks at what this means for everyday Americans and if this continued inflation will trigger a recession.
Viridiana and TJ, the owners of Huapango's Mexican cuisine, have been working hard, serving up authentic, delicious Mexican dishes to the community in Hillcrest for almost 2 decades. They've also been working hard to keep the doors open since the pandemic hit.
When the pandemic started, it's been the hardest years that we had to live through.
But it's been one hit after the next. Now that the pandemic is easing, inflation and gas prices are clawing into their profits.
The meat went up, the to-go boxes went up, the tortillas are going up, everything.
We already were struggling of the high price because of pandemic and all these things. Now the price, everything I'm 100% positive is going to go up.
They don't want to raise their prices, but menu prices are a tricky thing to increase.
A carne asada burrito or a plate of enchiladas, I can't go out for $22, so I have to have a set price for. So for us, with the food, we're kind of stuck.
We cannot afford it, and honest, I'm scared to raise the prices. If I raise the prices, the business is going to go down.
Alan Jin, an associate professor of economics at the University of San Diego, says Russia's invasion of Ukraine will result in continued inflation, impacting consumers and local businesses the most.
Yeah, I think it's going to be translated into things like the prices of products. With gas prices up, diesel prices up, that'll eventually then be built into the price of products. So unfortunately, this could keep inflation relatively high.
But he says because the economy is strong, it won't have a lasting impact or trigger a recession unless it drags on.
So a lot will depend then on how long that conflict it goes on. We're below 4% unemployment nationwide. That means that, again, the economy is in pretty good shape right now. So, even if this conflict goes through the summer, I think that's not going to be enough to tip the economy into a recession.
For now, Viridiana and TJ say they will keep working hard and remain hopeful they can continue to do what they love. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Players and owners of Major League teams struck out again late today in getting a labor agreement done. And that means that opening day will now be pushed back again, this time to April 14th. Sources say the players rejected the latest options and sent back a counter-proposal that went nowhere. Fans on social media are slamming both sides for being greedy, especially at a time when many Americans are facing financial difficulties. Organizations want to make sure workers know about their right to paid COVID-19 sick leave. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne met with organizations today, continuing outreach efforts.
While COVID-19 cases slowly decrease, the risk of getting sick still exists. Some groups continue outreach efforts to educate communities on vaccines, paid sick leave, and testing.
A couple of nonprofits and state agencies met today outside of the County of San Diego offices here in Escondido to launch the Worker Week of Action, aimed to increase awareness to workers' rights when it comes to COVID-19.
Universidad Popular was one of the organizations at the meeting. Arcela Núñez Álvarez with the group says volunteers have reached over 300,000 people through their outreach.
We dropped what we were doing and answered the call to make sure that our target industries and their families and their neighbors, especially frontline essential workers, had the access they needed to vaccines, vaccine information, and to ensure that every person in our county who wanted a vaccine had access to one.
She said different organizations worked together to make sure information got distributed in different languages, especially to marginalized communities.
Was available in 24 languages, allowing our message to reach individuals who normally don't have access to this information.
Magandang tanghali sa inyong lahat.
Along Thai, walong watu.
para poner este mensaje adelante.
The latest message organizations are pushing out to communities is the right to paid COVID-19 sick leave for California workers, regardless of immigration status. Patricia Alatorre with the Labor Commissioner's Office says workers are eligible for up to 80 hours of paid sick leave.
2022 supplemental paid sick leave law for COVID-19 covers workers at businesses with 26 or more employees who cannot work from home. The law applies to COVID-related sick leave from January 1st to September 30th, 2022.
Alatorre says it is illegal for employers to fire, reduce hours, or retaliate against workers for asking to use the paid sick leave. Workers can call the Labor Commissioner's Office at 833-LCO-INFO or the number on your screen for questions on paid sick leave or to file a wage claim or retaliation complaint. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
San Diego's new ambulance provider was grilled by city council members today after an early review found they were regularly understaffing ambulances. The fire department says they will be pursuing financial penalties. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman has more on why city officials are upset.
Falck ambulances have been on the streets in San Diego full-time for about 3 months now. The company won the city's 5-year 911 contract after beating out the previous provider, American Medical Response. Falck promised more staffing and new life-saving equipment.
Yes, so the ramp-up process was challenging.
Jeff Boehm runs Falck San Diego operations. The company spent 6 months building up before taking over just after Thanksgiving. He acknowledges that staffing requirements haven't been met yet.
We're slightly below that level. It depends. It's day to day. Now, there's challenges to that.
Boehm says the most recent COVID-19 surge complicated operations.
Now, we just came on the other side of the Omicron virus, so that's really good, and our staffing's improving very well. But January was challenging. 25% of our employees were out at some time sick with COVID.
Data from the city of San Diego over the last 3 months shows that Falck hasn't quite met their monthly staffing requirement. In February, they were about 8% short.
We're working towards meeting the goal that we said we would meet, and we're in a much better position today than we were when we started.
Fewer staff means some have to pull extra shifts, and the city is worried about busy crews and the potential for burnout.
As we move through the contract, we continue to address the requirements, and Falck, as I mentioned, is making achievements with each of those requirements.
Jody Pierce is the Deputy Chief of Emergency Medical Services for the San Diego Fire Rescue Department. She says the city runs the 911 system with Falck providing ambulance transports.
Each fire apparatus has a firefighter paramedic on it, and then the second medic is coming from Falck ambulance. And again, they're providing the transport to the hospital from the incident.
The department says to their knowledge, everyone has gotten the care they needed. And Pierce says that Falck's 3-month report card doesn't show the full picture.
I feel very good about, where we are right now in our contract agreement with them.
Falck is following through on other contract obligations like bringing in new ambulances. At least half of the fleet is brand new, and Falck says all the vehicles will be in by April.
You can never go wrong with a brand new ambulance.
Mark Selepak is a paramedic supervisor for Falck. He's worked emergency medical response in the city over the last 22 years, which has seen many different operators.
Rural Metro, SDMSE, AMR, and now Falck, Mobile Health Corp.
Selepak says the ambulances come with new tech that helps first responders and patients, like power loading gurneys.
Helps save our back. It's also with the wing gurneys, it's more suited for our heavier patients, but one of the big factors in those gurneys is it prevents injuries.
It's also now just one person instead of sometimes 2 or 3.
Eugenie Tuma is a 911 paramedic with Falck. She says ambulances also now have Lucas devices. They deliver automatic chest compressions.
It's super easy to use, yeah. And then it'll basically start compressions. It allows one more person to do other things rather than compressions. It actually frees up 2 people.
While they have new equipment, staffing issues are persisting. Falck reports that response times are at or near 90% across the city.
We're really proud of our Falck employees, our paramedics and our EMTs that are responding out to the San Diego residents and making sure that we get there in as quickly as possible time as we can. And you know, it's just been really under some tremendous strains in the last few months with COVID and folks being out ill, and they're just working really hard, and we're so proud of them. And I want the community to know that they're working really hard for them as well.
Falck could be fined by the city if they don't meet contract requirements. The San Diego Fire Rescue Department says they will continue working with the ambulance company to deliver the highest level of emergency services. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A proposed bill introduced by a San Diego-based assembly member could create a tax penalty for certain investors who have made it nearly impossible for many families to buy a home. The California Housing Speculation Act, or Assembly Bill 1771, was written by 78th District Assembly member Chris Ward. It's aimed at short-term investors who often outbid families with cash offers. The bill would impose a tax up to 25% on an investor's net capital gain from the time of purchase until the final sale or exchange of a property.
Taking gobs of tens of millions of dollars out of our community through the cumulative effect of all these transactions, that's not fair either, because the people that are left struggling are people like Tricia, who get outbid 30 times trying to get into their home.
Ward believes the bill would discourage investors or slow down speculators so potential homeowners can have a fair chance. San Diego's efforts to expand the convention center suffered a legal setback this week. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says a judge declared the ballot measure to fund the project dead.
Measure C on the March 2020 ballot would have raised the city's hotel tax to fund an expanded convention center, homelessness programs, and infrastructure. It got almost but not quite a two-thirds majority. That kicked off a long and complex legal battle over what threshold the measure needed for approval and whether the city waited too long before declaring the measure passed. The nonprofit Alliance San Diego sued the city over Measure C.
This case could have been about any ballot measure. Our concern was about the power taken by City Council to ignore election law and manipulate the election to get the results that they wanted.
Mayor Todd Gloria sent KPBS the following statement, quote, "This ruling is an unfortunate delay, but we're undeterred in seeking the court's validation of Measure C. We will continue to fight to secure the millions of dollars for homelessness and road repair that a significant majority of San Diegans voted for. The City Council will have to vote on whether to move the case up to the Court of Appeal." Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria wants to lower speed limits on some San Diego streets. Previously, cities in California had to base their speed limits on the actual speeds that most drivers go. And that forced some cities to repeatedly raise speed limits, even on dangerous streets. But a new state law gives cities more discretion over speed limits, and Mayor Gloria wants to make use of it, particularly with traffic deaths on the rise.
Obviously, a way that you can reduce the likelihood of an injury or a fatality. You know, when vehicles are moving at slower speeds, that definitely reduces the likelihood of that terrible thing happening. It's really a new world when it comes to how people are getting from A to B. And we as a city have to be dynamic and start making changes, not just with the leadership, whether it's the mayor or the transportation director, but also in the way that we govern our streets with those lower speed limits.
72 people died in traffic collisions on city streets last year. That is a 41% increase in traffic deaths compared to 2019. California now has the authority to set its own tough emission standards for cars and SUVs. Today, the EPA approved a waiver allowing the state to set stricter pollution rules, reversing a Trump administration policy. California will also be allowed to impose mandates for zero-emission vehicles that do not contribute to global warming. At least 15 states and the District of Columbia have signed on to the same vehicle standards.
We have a few few cooler days ahead in the forecast, so I want to emphasize the few because it's really going to be only about 2 days, and then temperatures are going to warm up again as we head into the weekend. A few showers also possible here on Thursday, but again, it's going to be very sporadic here and not widespread, just a couple showers there in the forecast for your Thursday. There are some wind advisories that will go into effect 10 a.m. Thursday. That's going to be mainly off to our north and east, but gusty winds possible from time to time, even outside of those areas that are under the wind advisory. Something we'll watch closely here as we move through the next couple of days. Temperatures tonight getting back down into the 30s and 40s, 43 for you down into Ramona, 49 into El Cajon, 36 in Mount Laguna. San Diego, not a bad night, 57 degrees there for your overnight low. Thursday, cooler trend across much of the interior Southwest here. Temperatures well below what is normal for this time of year. In some spots dropping 20 to 30 degrees from Wednesday into Thursday, but we're really not going to feel all that much of a change near the coast. Across the interior parts of Southern California, we may see a little bit of a change here, but even then, it's going to quickly rebound as we move into the weekend. So a couple showers here for your day on Thursday. Low 60s in Ramona, mid 60s in El Cajon, 64 out towards Escondido. And then Friday, milder air starts to make a return here across much of California. Moving forward near the coast, temperatures in the mid 60s there for you Thursday, morning shower, then the sunshine returns, and we get back up into the upper 60s and low 70s. Further inland, temperatures go from the mid 60s on Thursday into the 70s and even upper 70s by the time we get into Saturday. Plenty of sunshine on the way. In the mountains, we go from the 40s back into the 50s and even closer to 60 degrees as we look ahead to the start of the next work week. Plenty of sunshine on the way. And in the deserts, temperatures warming up from the 70s into the 80s and maybe even mid 80s at that. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
Transgender people from Mexico living in the United States can now get birth certificates and passports that affirm their name and gender. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis tells us why this means so much to the cross-border LGBTQ community.
Before this year, transgender Mexican nationals who wanted to change their birth certificate or passport to reflect their name and gender had to overcome a series of bureaucratic and discriminatory obstacles. Carlos Gonzalo Gutierrez is the Consul General of Mexico here in San Diego. Here's how he describes the old process.
Until now, have to go back to Mexico, go in front of a judge, and claim through litigation for the recognition of the right of identity. Obviously, that in itself is discriminatory.
But now, every Mexican consulate in the country allows transgender people to update their documents. 3 local activists were the first to go through the process here in San Diego. Jamie Arrangure is the director of the Proyecto Translatina advocacy group and calls it a victory in a years-long battle.
Now we're going to feel freedom to show the passport or ID that says, oh, this is me, this is my real me.
With these proper IDs, transgender people from Mexico will not face the same levels of discrimination in San Diego that they experienced before. This is Gustavo Solis for KPBS News.
The Biden administration is canceling more than $6 billion worth of federal student loan debt. The U.S. Department of Education said it has identified 100,000 borrowers eligible for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. The program launched 15 years ago, but the Biden administration made changes to it in October. Now, some borrowers have until October to apply for the forgiveness. For more information on student loan debt cancellation, go to the Department of Education's website at ed.gov. The new congressional spending bill does not include an extension of school lunch waivers authorized at the beginning of the pandemic. The waivers let schools distribute free meals to all students without verifying their family's income. The USDA reports about 30 million students now receive free school meals, and that is up from about 20 million children who qualified before the pandemic. Some lawmakers are pushing to extend the waivers for another year. Concussions may lead to a higher risk of kids developing mental health problems. Mandy Gaither has a look at the new research and what parents need to know.
Concussions and kids' mental health. New research suggests a link between the two.
some of the primary symptoms after a concussion can include things like changes in mood, anxious thoughts, changes in behavior, irritability, that sort of thing.
The Canadian study published in JAMA Network Open examined records over a 10-year period between 2010 and 2020 of kids between the ages of 5 and 18 who had a concussion or orthopedic injury. None had a mental health diagnosis before being hurt. Researchers found that concussed youth had a 40% increased risk of developing a mental health issue compared with children the same age and sex with an orthopedic injury. Those who had a concussion also had an increased risk of self-harming and undergoing psychiatric hospitalization compared to those with an orthopedic injury. Kelly McNally, co-director of the Complex Concussion Clinic at Nationwide Children's Hospital, says parents should be aware.
I think a primary thing for parents to do is just to keep that conversation rolling with their children. So if they have had an injury, ask them, how are they feeling? How are they doing emotionally? How are they coping?
If there are any red flags, such as mood changes, being withdrawn, or your child isn't enjoying activities they once did, McNally says get help.
We don't want parents to be afraid for their children to play sports, but it does provide information to parents to help empower them to help get the right help for their children if they are seeing mental health symptoms after something like a concussion.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Here's another look at today's top stories. Californians have been paying the highest price in the nation for gas for some time now. In his State of the State address, Governor Gavin Newsom said he'd soon be submitting a proposal to put money back in drivers' pockets. However, no specifics were given. Today, the average price of a gallon of regular gas in San Diego County rose nearly 12 cents to $5.60. And a couple nonprofits and state agencies came together in Escondido today to increase awareness of workers' rights when it comes to COVID. And that includes paid sick leave as well as free testing and vaccines. It's also illegal for employers to fire, reduce hours, or retaliate against workers for asking to use the paid sick leave. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.